on a timeline, and we want to do a lot in this time. So about 20 minutes, we'll spend about 20 minutes on each of our presentations, and we will leave 20 minutes for Q&As, because maybe you had some experience in implementing Scrum, and let's exchange opinions. I am Hanna Usova. Not quite what the moderator said. I'm the chief of the educational program. That means we are not using the programs of the Ministry of Education, but we're developing our own curricula, which helped us implement Scrum in education. Spilna Shkola is the school that works under the principles of the information training educational environment, and we're introducing Scrum for 3 years now as the key form of education at school. Generally, Scrum is a framework or rules of the game. This term came from IT, where it's used quite actively, and it's also an approach to project management, where you can describe your criteria towards the end result, but the outline of the end product, it can only be observed at the end. Scrum is also a very popular word, a very fashionable word, which is widely used beyond IT field for many years, and it has its implementation and manifestation in education as well. It came to education where different project methods had been used before. People were considering their effectiveness, their adaptability, but Scrum is often used as a kind of screen, where the word Scrum means a lot more than the substance of technology itself. More and more people in Ukraine and outside understand that taking a tool from business and transposing it to educational environment as is can be harmful for children. But there are questions that can be adjusted. What criteria could we use to take these criteria and implement them in business and school education? In our Spilno school, we like this metaphor very much. The dog and the tail. Who wags what? If our school uses Scrum for branding, that means the tail is wagging the dog. We would very much like to advise against Scrum in several options, several cases. First is when the school system remained identical to the situation 50 years ago. So there's one single teacher who's lecturing from the blackboard, and only he is talking, he keeps the discipline roughly, and the delivery of information is frontal. Scrum can only be implemented as a little game, little local game, and the kids will perceive this as a little game, so all the bonuses will be lost. Another option is when training in school education lives its own separate life. Every teacher creates their own world, and teaching of their subject, which is the most important at school, interdisciplinary relations, and they do not work in the system of education. You will be unhappy with the end results because the kids will be sort of pushed into the framework of a certain subject, and they will be thinking that if you go beyond this framework, they will be doing something wrong. Generally, Scrum is a very flexible system. And if you look at the kids' community at school, it's very flexible as well. And if we start flexible introduction, which is called also agile in the modern world, If you apply agile principles to planning, then the enthusiasm of the elder team gets carried over to children, and you start working with in the mode of flexible development at school. Another option when Scrum is used quite widely, or a training program that you're using at school, is in the field available for implementation through Scrum. Спільна школа, that's our brand picture. We know we are learning 5 competencies. Everything that's available in space, people, resources, activities aim at giving kids the opportunity to think, communicate, manage themselves, cooperate, and feel as a part of the world. So when we were looking for tools that will enable the kids to develop most of these competencies and keep working in their own pace and go as deep as every participant determines, we found Scrum. And we adjusted it a bit. Since Scrum is a very flexible system, it is widely known that every corporation that's using it has its own Scrum features. So in our case, we call it Scrum 5 Keys. So we use it to develop 5 key competencies that we mentioned above. A bit more details for those who don't quite know what Scrum is. Scrum clearly states the roles. Here are the key roles. First, there's product owner. Usually that's an adult who understands and orders the product they want to get at the end. They're responsible for criteria of this product. They determine the important criteria that need to be taken into account in the product and the criteria that can be left to the participant's choice. There's a development team. The development team is the whole school, and there's a Scrum Master. That's a person who cooperates with the development team to enable the development team to get to know each other, to understand each other better, sometimes to resolve conflicts in certain matters. Development team in classic Scrum, according to the methodology, includes under 6 persons. According to educational experience, the best number of people is 4 persons. Since the team is building the product under certain criteria, there's nothing impossible there for kids aged 6, for multi-age teams, for newly established teams, for super friends teams. Each of these options have their own advantages and disadvantages, but there are lots of insights in the process of implementation of this project. Scrum Master is a very specific role. We're following the experience of international education, and Scrum Masters are often kids within the team itself. We picked a kid in the team to be a Scrum Master, or the team was selecting a Scrum Master amongst themselves. But within those 3 years, and in the 3rd year, we realized that it's much more effective when a Scrum Master is an adult. They don't only facilitate it, they also support the processes and they teach the techniques of emotional regulation, facilitation, etc. So they give them new strategies. So Scrum Master now for us is an adult for each team. Classic Scrum includes many different terms, such as backlogs, Scrum boards, sprints for different product implementation, but it's very important to understand the boundaries, where the methodology works for the sake of methodology and where it is effective. So I would like to call on you to scale very attentively, depending on year, depending on age, and depending on the product. So the word product has been sounding all the time, and it's quite different in the system of schools. It's very important that a product doesn't become a task. A product is described as criteria instead of instructions. Criteria are a description of how things will be implemented at the end. Instructions are a step-by-step instructions on how to develop it. So when you give the kids criteria, you give them the space for creative opportunities to develop this. Generally, Scrum is a very rhythmic process. It clearly states the deadlines for each product, 1 week, 2 weeks, framework meetings, but it's very important to understand that between those frameworks, we need to give the kids as much space as possible with very easy structure for the teamwork. It's very important for the kids to talk to each other, to complain to each other, to create their ideas and to work in at their own pace. One of the most important parts of the Scrum work is retrospective. It's a summary which is unrelated to the product. For products, there is a review where they're showing the product itself. Retrospective is where we can look back at our teamwork, where it was, what problems we had. At that time, the kids learn not only to formulate their thoughts and speak up and express their thoughts about their friends, but also to hear out the others with their claims, with their opinions, conflicts, even whims. And according to all that, we have to understand that even if it seems that a team is working independently, they have their own tasks and they all went into their own rooms to work, it doesn't mean that you don't need a whole bunch of involved adults who are following this process. This has to be a psychologist, teachers who are an additional resource. This can also involve parents or external adults who can give a different emphasis. It can be cooks, system administrators, IT people. You never know whom you're going to need for the next product, so everybody has to be ready. And they have to be ready not only to be a resource, but to establish the system of support. Because Scrum is followed with failed deadlines, conflicts, and sincere willingness to work on and to do more. And most frequently to do everything in their own way, not like the owners wanted. Respectively, we can't but mention the difficulties that you're going to face when you implement Scrum in any educational system. First is determining the boundaries of your flexibility. Determining the boundaries of flexibility that any system can afford. These can be the deadlines clearly stated in the deadline, particularly on the presentation of the product. This can also mean written criteria for the product, and most importantly, that's clear boundaries of the product participant, which clearly state whether or not the product needs to be upgraded, followed up, and so on. It has to be emotional. If it's unemotional, it means that the kids have not yet even carried away by the product. So the kids also need to start obtaining mechanisms of emotional regulation, and adults should have the understanding of the features of emotional regulation at that age. Is it technically possible to have a certain level of emotional involvement at that age? And we need resources. This can mean technical resources all the way through to mounting stations, and lots of human resources as well. Speaking of difficulties, it's also important to mention the bonuses. Now, the most important bonus is that Scrum allows us to build teams flexibly, in a flexible way. With the establishment of the product, if you can let this process go, the teams start forming through different ages, and age gap can be from 1 or 2 years to 3 and more. because they get picked up by the kids following the kids' willingness. If different age kids are involved in the process of product development, then you would not even be able to list their interconnections. They will be different in different types and different spaces, and if there is a distribution of tasks uncontrolled by the adults, you will get a lot of surprises that you couldn't even expect. So we learn to accept the people regardless of characters, of nature, and by essence, this is a very good anti-bullying vaccination. When you work at Scrum, well, Scrum isn't equal to hard skills, and it isn't equal to the skills that school gives one way or another. But while working in Scrum, children finally understand why they need to do this, why they need to learn to read, to write. They clearly understand the gaps in their knowledge at the time. So there's a request. There is a request. I want to learn to read. Why is my writing so illegible? And then it really helps in developing their hard skills. And another option, another thing about implementation of Scrum in the system, I don't know if it's a bonus or an advantage or a disadvantage, is when Scrum goes into space, it creates a lot of demand for choice.
Children who got used to work in the free system that they can impact, they're asking to have an impact for certain processes, then they ask for formulation of a separate space and time, and these are topics connected to Scrum. Just to sum up Scrum and its implementation in the system, that's a great, and if we go along that path, we want all to have gone according to this direction. Thank you. Hello, friends. I would like to change the presentation. There is no person to change the presentation. It's great. It's actually great because I hate presentations. If we will have this opportunity, it would be good. So my part of this is how we, as a system, we have defined a necessary for the innovation space. How do we define the democratic values and values that have to be ruled, be used in this school? We use it as my colleague said, both in Scrum system as an educational opportunity, and also these are elaborations that they can help any other space that want to develop children with the help of democratic value and teach them these values. What kind of conditions should be there? I'll start for now. So here we should talk about a number of things that, okay. My colleague has already spoken about the frameworks that the educational space have to be defined. You have to talk about everything begins from the space. Both children and staff are coming in, even parents who are also learning these certain things when they're communicating with children. This is all big educational process, and nobody should fall out of this process. And here we have to think, if the space selects a path to be democratic. Then the frameworks where children should be working and they have to be flexible first and foremost. We have to set this framework, but we have to be ready that they can be changed to the new frameworks, to new rules, new possibilities and opportunities that children can use. And the very important moment is that we have to explain this to children because it's a very vulnerable sort of borderline. When the space changes, it doesn't it shouldn't be looking as breaking the borders of this space, because if the children see that the system can actually break up, children can use it not only in educational space but in their lives. So the space has to provide this opportunity, very vivid and transparent opportunities, that it's normal when the space is changing and evolutionizing. Then we have to think, why is it important? Why is it important to provide children with this opportunity to choose space and the impact, which is the most important thing? We have a lot of elements of the system that impacts this educational space. We have a lot of elements and subjects that have an active impact, and each of these subjects should have a right to choose. And most importantly, the right has to be provided in the same conditions. When there is a space that regulates something, sets up these borders. Second is all these subjects that can impact this space, and it can impact it according to the same system. Nobody can come and say, okay, we'll do things differently, but you can't say, you can't. It won't be democratic if you just come in and say, okay, we will do things differently. And here, there is a role for children to resolve this issue. This is an important part that Hanna has spoken about regarding Scrum. When we talk about retrospectives of their teamwork regarding our system, there is a question. What do you want or can change? And the system is also asking, what can we change in this work? And it's not happening in one moment. It's done through planning, through discussions, and different opportunities of resolving these issues. And the main thing is to discuss together. All the elements of the system should discuss this, because you cannot make a decision from top down and give this to children as a sort of an option for them. So children should be engaged. What has to be changed and how it can be changed. This is the educational space for children, and this is the essence why we come and teach the children according to certain principles, and then the opportunities are set for children that children will use in the future. Then the role is one system has to distribute this or spread this democratic values for all of its space, for all of the elements, solutions, rules, laws, changes in the solutions, and how the system works. So the same system should be used. There should be a democratic way of discussion of these changes, because if at a certain moment children or other subjects see that in one case we use choice and democracy, and in other case we are pushing from top down, they will have a dissonance. They will not understand what kind of system is that, because it's not going to be holistic. It's not going to be the same. So selectiveness of the moments that we're deciding where we're going to change, where we're not going to change, whether we will have a discussion, we will ask them about their wishes or desires, it will sort of kick children out from this educational space because they will nevertheless ask questions, even in their hands, among themselves, in their class, in groups. They will wish these changes because any person would like to change something that the person doesn't like. So if the system ignores what children don't like and force upon them their rules because we know how it's better, because we cannot know for a fact what is better for children unless we ask them and how, in what conditions they will feel more comfortable. It's also important in a situation when we arrive to, when we come to children and ask children, and they say we want this system, this is children's responsibility. Just like any democratic system, we are bringing them to the results, outcomes of their choice. When we're forcing these values, children are facing with this wall of responsibility. So this is their desire, and that's how their desire was implemented. So if we don't use this, the desires are still going to stay in their heads and their actions, and if we don't listen to them, then children will be pushing these borders through their active position. They will show you that no, we don't want to be in the system that are forced upon us, and it will bring about a certain collapse, and the system will be pushed. So we're talking about the space that bears the load of democratic values. When we're starting to talk about and talking about children participating in the discussion, there should always be a number of things, number of moments. Number one is coming from the retrospective of this work and any issues discussion. What was right? What was wrong? What were the main problems? What can you change? What all of us can change? How can we change it? And this discussion and possibility for any child to have an impact, to discuss this, is the most important moment of the system. Because, like in the adult life, children can choose this passive position, and this would be their choice. But the availability of choice uh, is really important for their development, because if they don't have this choice, then there is this desire to break the system, and there is a thought appearing in their head that my choice, my ideas are being ignored. So when we talk about options, it's also a very important condition. This condition came from IT as well, because no idea should be rejected right away. No idea should not be treated as, okay, you can think about it, don't even think about it. From that moment on, we have to discuss why this idea is better or worse than others. Why, amongst other options, we are selecting this particular option. Why, in our space, according to our rules and borders that we set in this space, we are selecting this or other option. And again, we have to talk to children about this. That has to be a general discussion and general communication on equal conditions. And then we're coming to the solution. We're coming to the solution, then goes to the space. Why it's going to the space? Because it's going to impact the space. This would be a new part of the system, new part of how this space will work out. And one of the last opportunities are the conditions what the space should be ready to. What Hanna has already mentioned, the space should be flexible. The borders should not be tough or unbreakable. They can be movable. They should be movable, and this is normal. That's why the space should be ready for accepting new systems, new solutions, new solutions for these issues. like for instance in the system of Scrum Masters, for instance from your own experience, both you and children and the entire team went through a number of stress moments of changing the space, because first we're talking the fact that the child can be a Scrum Master in this team and they will be working in the Scrum team. Then we're saying no. We're saying that the child is not working in the team, is just leading. Then the adult. So each of these solutions, even if it's discussed with children, this is sort of moving these borders, the system, and it's still a certain stress, and the system should be ready to hold on to this stress. And so, in the foundation of the values that we want to build is that the rules can change. Rules according of the space's existence can be changed, but the main laws that the space, the rules can be changed. The laws according to which the society is governed can be changed, but the main democratic core values, they should not be changed. This border of democratic values, it can actually grow. These are the opportunities that we can use in our space and reaction to different changes. The space acts as a barrier, which is not sort of calms down these moves in the system. So obviously changes are always concern, always nervousness, what's going to happen next, how it's going to work, can we implement this system, will it be better, will it be worse. These issues should be discussed later when we try the system, because we have already discussed it, we have already voted for it, and this is the main choice, because certain children that can lose the vote, they are often divided into several teams, and there can be a difference of 1 or 2 or 3 votes, and this is normal. And the space should be ready to explain why such conditions are established in such a space, why the world is working according to this particular democratic criteria, and why the choice of majority and responsibility of this majority is important in this space. I will probably stop here. I really love talking to the audience and answering your questions. So do we have any questions? We can either divide questions to me and Anna, or just tell us who you're. Stakeholders in the Scrum process. Yeah, probably I'm going to start answering. This is the big process and forming of this feeling of self-feeling of stakeholder. It took us about 2 years. So participation of each team and their support from the parents and everybody who can be engaged. So the level is very different. There are younger children, and we created some options where the demonstration of the product with the owner of the product is discussed, because the owner of the product is either the teacher, but the large presentation of all products, only the end result, so that it's not a stress. There are older children for whom the criticism for just about anybody is more important than their products. So we have a say preliminary review of the product. So it could be like a great fair or something, and then there is a secondary discussion with the product owner on the acceptance of the product. Did I answer your question? probably is also my question. The owner of the product is sprint is a week. It's clearly defined in the space. We know from Tuesday to Tuesday is one sprint. So on the sprint, the owner of the product, it's difficult for children to accept the criteria whether the sprint. The Scrum Masters that are competent in that. We had some products where the product owner was in the end only but in the process of education, in order to form, so there for the retrospective, there should be a feedback to the owner. Sprint has to accept the product. This is our own. No, in stand-up, no. Stand-up is a very emotional process. This is just a loss of time for the adults. So if one more person apart from the Scrum Meister is, so if the passage of sprint, if in a classic Scrum, it's separate. So from a point of view of the person who worked with children as the product owner, I worked with 2 cycles. So the product was the laws. So they've selected any topic, and according to the criteria, they had to write the laws. And me, as a product owner, when issuing the sprint, I was giving them an opportunity to read it, to talk to them, and ask questions about clear or unclear criteria. But writing this criteria is a necessary condition, because if you don't set forth the criteria for the product for children, simple explanation is not enough, or just a word what has to be done. How many pages, what is the volume, what it should contain. So all these parts should be written down and discussed by the entire team so that the entire team understands it. Do you teach Scrum for children? Sometimes, yes.
I visited your school in September. And both then and now I have a question about adjusted KPIs. We've asked this question before, that lots of things need to be done, a lot of materials need to be created so that we could have access to them. Has it changed? Yeah, the kids have grown. Well, given the fact that the product is changing, no, we're trying to take higher and further higher level, but fortunately we have about 20 classic teenagers whose English is good enough to address this resource, because Ukrainian or even Russian-speaking resources are very hard to adjust. But moving on to English spectrum is much easier. So what has changed since the time you were there? The change of Scrum Master from the kids to adults, and adult Scrum Master helps us adjust this. The first is Scrum Master, and we had a very active cycle of creation of resources. And with cycles and products that were there, well, the resources provided by internet and other spots, they're not enough to explain this to kids or to give them a chance to work on this product well. So given our understanding on what are these products, what are the boundaries, where the kids know where to go with this product, we were doing this on a regular basis. I'm not quite aware of Scrum, but it reminds me of another thing. Well, yeah, those who have worked in the projects, can just add more of a structured rules of the game. What changes about the project, and this is a very important detail, is the sense of the project. There's a client behind this, and the product is cooperating with the team. And the task is to create the project as well as possible. And it's not a sort of very technical acceptance. It's a very flexible cooperation. So Scrum and the rhythm of the project, has to be done differently. Any project work is creating this process, and Scrum gives a chance to develop the project. And what is flexible development? At the first stage, you submit sort of half-baked product. And there's then a second layer. The Scrum Master is saying that, okay, what you need to do this and that. There's no sense that the product is unfinished, and there's no sense that it's finished. To make sure that kids don't have perfectionism. No, we don't assess the products, we just submit the products. Does the product meet those criteria? Yes, it either meets or doesn't meet the criteria. Criteria were either met or non-met. It's just that this team has worked that way, and then it is very it is discussed in great detail, very retrospectively. So the shortcomings. We have 70 plus kids involved in Scrum, but we cannot say that every kid is involved in the same way. So there's a respective process for each kid with their features, with their flexibility, with their views of the quality, and we can't say that the whole system is working by 63.5%, or the system has started working better now. It's very hard to measure it if we're talking about the system as a whole. So on that complexity, we have a different option. We have a progress for every kid. It's not an assessment process from point A to point B. The kid is setting goals on certain competences, and they can come at the end of the term and say that, okay, I've really improved my strategy. Now I can work with those who are not my friends. And I think this is my progress. For example, I started reading English resources, and this is my progress in my knowledge of English, for example. The happiness index for kids in this work. Well, yeah, we didn't specifically measure it. Our academic year is 11 months. We just started vacations on the 1st of September, and kids were coming back on the 2nd of August. So the kids do not divide between the school time and their free time, and they want to come back. They don't want to disband. So are they studying? Well, our training day is 8 to 8, and it cannot include Scrum only because it's unrealistic for any person. It's about 2 to 3 hours per day, but there's space for hard skills. We do not eliminate hard skills. The school gives space for this. We learn to read and write and do maths and technical subjects. Just that the technical part is smaller, and we do it only after the kids understand it in Scrum. There's an opportunity for a change, and all the courses are included in the school system. And the kids can choose which cycles they want to do more. This is a very active process, and it would all be good if we didn't plan on an hour or two of rest in between those hours. What do they do in between? They jump on the well, how do we plan our days? When do I work? When do I rest? I am behind in reading. I will take the selective reading course because in my main skills and my main goals, I am lagging behind. And it can also seem that small kids, grade 1 and 2, cannot assess this, but they actually can assess that. They can face their problems and whether or not they fulfill those goals or not. That was your question, and then I'll answer the other one. So you stepped away from actual school curriculum, Ministry of Education. Well, our kids still get the attestation, the national attestation, but this is, well, we had a funny situation. We keep it somewhere. Our kids were developing this for a whole cycle. They were doing a project on black holes, and they worked on the light distribution, and then there was a test, and the test asked on nature studies, is Earth rotating around the sun or vice versa? And our kids thought it was really silly. So there are areas where our kids know a lot more because they dig deeper. But there are disadvantages. For example, we only work on the good writing and good, we don't work on the discipline that much. We don't tell them to write with blue pen. We don't tell them to sit for 45 minutes. So it's very important not to step away from the general context. Зазвичай найперше питання, воно з'являється десь на початку другого класу. Я написав завдання, а всі мої сокомандники не змогли його прочитати. Що сталося? And then, I wrote up a task, and then I wrote a whole page, and nobody could read anything, and so my product was not accepted. And then the question gets asked, well, it's not sort of calligraphy. There are kids who just like to do beautiful things. We have calligraphy notebooks. There are people who just do it for technical reasons, just to pass. But there are people who want to have a non-typical handwriting, and for half a year we've been working on creating their own handwriting. This is a bit deeper than calligraphy. What's the day like in the school? It's different it's a game, communication until 9. Clearly it's Kiev, so we arrive a bit later. So from 8 to 9, then 9 a.m. is breakfast, then we have a general meeting, a sort of briefing for the whole school. Well, our school is 70 plus kids, it's not even 200. And then we have a block of studies. It can be Scrum process, or it can be technical, maths, English, writing, but it's included. Small academic groups which are not divided by age, but by their skills at a certain time. And then there is lunch, 4 to 6. And then there's half an hour of debriefing. Sometimes kids present something for discussion, sometimes we want to inform about something. We make decisions, we vote, we re-vote. Then 3.5 hours courses, additional courses. Some are doing their own work, some are completing their work in Scrum with their teams. Some people are sleeping, playing outside. And then there's a sort of supper and their own time where they can study or learn. Unfortunately, the questions are not asked with a microphone. Well, the courses can include chess or Spanish or something else. We cannot say that we do not think that studies is just math studies or something. It's very important that the kids are, really involved since morning. The question is about goal setting. Do you have some sort of systemic process of goal setting for junior kids, and how do you work with that aspect? Because I think at 6, maximum they can do is say, I want something. Yes, there is I want, but also it hurts me. I dislike something very badly, that I'm very late all the time, that I cannot establish relations, that I don't have friends. And this is a parallel request with which you can work. On the individual basis, tutors and advisors are working on that in the space. The curriculum is to develop competences. The aim is to develop competences with the 5 keys. Think, communicate, control yourself, get quality indication, and all of this has quality indicators. 7 to 12. I control myself when I do this and that. And there's a whole table where the kids say whether or not they can do things, when do they want to eat, whether or not they can make peace after they had a fight. And they can see which of those indicators are really lagging behind. And then the task of the adult is to figure out whether or not they can work on this, whether or not they can do this. And then through several stages for 2 or 3 years, the kids know that this is something I need to work on, or I need to talk to a psychologist, or our curator has to do that. It depends on age. And the kids, yes, definitely in the 3rd year. Unfortunately, the speaker is not using the microphone for questions. The kids can come or not come as to what they want. No, I'm talking about psychological age. I have a tiny school, and goal setting is very important. And of course we take into account the age. I want is not quite a goal. It's just that those primary things, I so much want to work more. And see how you want to do this. And then we can do it in small steps. So usually the kids want, I don't want my younger sister to get on my nerves. So do we need to sit down and talk to him through it and how to deal with it? In a year or 2, this is going to be a different goal at the goal level, but it's same as, when it's 6, they think as a project team creating a product, it really inspires them. And it's a bit of a frame that we're setting. It's just that we don't have so many of 6-year-old kids, but we've been through this. 7 or 8, this is slightly better. Do you have any patriotic education? Yes, sure. Freedom of choice, democratic values. tolerance, understanding the world. We have three key laws on the boundaries that I mentioned. So the first is the law of total respect, particularly in all elements of space. And disrespect is not allowed, even if there are some options. To material objects as well, to resources of the school, that's respect. Things that are given to them as tasks for project making. Secondly, we have a free space and the kids are free to choose, but we are sort of watching them do that. We're watching over them. And they are responsible for their choices. They can say, okay, I choose to take a rest, but then I need to catch up. So what's the growth? The kids may not be able to control themselves even at grade 8. And then the adults can get involved in the sense that the more self-regulated the kid is, the kid in the second grade can be better, more self-regulated. Well, you're worried about 6-year-olds, but we're more concerned about the teenagers. It's just that the 6-year-olds' lack of control will be less terrible in terms of consequences as teenagers. And the next concept is lifelong learning. They come to educational space and they have to learn. They have to move somewhere. Because stagnation is really not our choice. You cannot sit and do nothing for a day. You have to want to do something. You have to be going somewhere. This is a very clear understanding. And it doesn't come straight away. And we face this all the time. It's all over the space all the time.
And from multiple repetition. Are you going to talk about time as well? Yeah. We are on vacation. Luckily, our school year starts later. How much does it cost for the parents? If we're saying that this is a full all-inclusive with all the stationery, trips and everything, at least 15,000 per month. That's roughly what it is. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.